social media pages, just go ahead and share that link that I shared to you.
Okay.
And then that's how you'll let, people know that's the link that they'll have to click, obviously, if they just want to, I don't know, watch the event or whatever, I guess.
Right, okay, yeah, I'll post that now.
Okay, so let's see here.
Coming in loud and clear.
Yeah, that's good to know. I'm glad to, actually, let me close up my Facebook here now so I don't have that in the background. Because, yeah, that's actually the thing.
While we're behind the scenes here, I'm taking my opportunity to munch down. Go ahead.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah, go for it. Actually, I was getting ready to have a conversation with Anthony Samaroff. He's from Scotland. He's from the Scottish Liberty podcast. And he was at his mother's when we were going to talk. And my God, the connection was so terrible. We couldn't even go 5 minutes into it. We just had to say, okay, well, we'll try another time because, yeah, it's no good when you don't have a decent enough connection that you can't, hear what people are saying because they get all that, it's not interrupted with it breaking down. Is everything still okay on your side of things, Matt?
You got some pretty...
Yeah, I can hear you both fine, yeah.
You got some pretty ominous lighting there.
Yeah, it's a little on the... Yeah, actually, if you put your head in the middle, it kind of looks like a halo effect there.
That's fully intentional.
Yeah, right on. Okay, so like I say, I didn't even. Well, obviously, as you know, as a libertarian, Victor being an anarchist, I don't care for structuring these kind of events. And some people like to, or you get so many minutes for this. Now, like I said, if you guys want to do your 5-minute opening statement, like as far as your stance, go for that. Take your 5 minutes apiece. But I would never even try to suggest I'm going to silence or shut someone down in midstream of something that they're trying to put forth. I think most of us, we're all adults here, so let's at least allow each other to say what they got to say, because we're all like, I'm not going to try, that's the thing, I'm not going to try, you'll get ample time to say whatever you've got to say. So just, the only thing I would even never have to intervene is if you're talking over each other. It's not that I'm going to be picking a side, it's just that obviously the people that are listening, they got to be able to hear your perspective. And if you're both talking at the same time, it's not going to work. So, like I say, this isn't going to be structured, right?
Well, we'll leave
the big time structuring things to the real authoritarians. We're going to kind of leave things a little bit more free and open so that you can actually, we'll kind of lead by example, I guess, right?
Yeah, well,
yeah, no worries.
Just in the spirit of all of that, yeah. I mean, I know that the whole sizzle of debate is supposed to have its dramatic overtures and whatnot, but I'd rather, please, unlike the Larkin Rose fiasco, is to actually have a rational and civilized conversation. Sort this thing out as opposed to two swords going at one another and a one-upmanship kind of bullshit. If we can avoid that, that would be great.
Well, yeah, how I usually start out everything when I'm dealing with people that I don't know personally is I initially want to take you on as if you have good intentions. That's all I care. And then I'm just going to deal with, just like every human experience I've ever had to undertake in my life, I'm going to deal with it and react accordingly. So if you're, like I say, if you're come from a position, I don't even care if you take a position that's in contrast to me or whatever. It's at least if you're showing to me that you're, showing clear and concise language, you're giving proper points as to why you're taking that stance. That's fine. That's kind of what we do. That's actually why I love doing these things is because it shows people that instead of listening to these idiots in the media that, they put a bunch of, political pundits up there and they know who exactly they're picking, right? I never picked you guys. I don't try to construct a narrative. I just want to hear what people have to say and let the people hear. That's the kind of freedom I love. And I think most people accept and embrace that and respect those that stand for those kind of principles, right?
Yeah,
definitely. I mean, I see it as just for me, it's not about beating Victor or anything like that. It's more about us communicating our ideas and discussing it, and helping to understand where each other's coming from, and the points that we want to make. That's what it's about for me. So, I'm sure it'll be civil.
Yeah.
For sure. I've dealt with Victor many times in the past, and Victor is definitely civil when you're talking about these things. And it sounds like you're going to do the same thing. So I'm not overly concerned at all as far as that goes today. And like I say, take the time you need. Now, obviously, you'll probably know in your own head, just don't go run on if you find yourself, and I've had to deal with that myself. If I end up repeating myself, I have to kind of, okay, I've already stress that point. No point in.
No, I know the etiquette that you can speak of. I mean, you can speak at like a certain length, but you have to have an internal clock in consideration that,
Yeah.
okay, sometimes I've had made shorter points, but then I extended on something, but back, okay, now you have to have that awareness of yourself in respect to manners and consideration. But certainly to make your point clear, though, to make your point clear.
Yeah. I will point out the one thing I have noticed it's actually a real good thing to do, and I do it myself a lot when I have these kinds of discussions, is rather than, because there are a lot of times like your opponent will bring something up that you'll be like, oh shit, just put a note down real quick on paper or in your notepad on your computer, and that way you can keep that reference point, right? So that because that's another thing. There might be one point you want to counter or rebut, but then they'll move on to something else, and then your train of thought has moved. So I always do that. Keep a little bit of a notepad, or like I say, I just use the notebook application on my computer and just write down the little point that the person is pointing out.
You can see that Matt he knows it's going to get an involved conversation, so he's getting himself ready.
You've literally just reminded me to get a pen and paper. Just saying.
Hey, it's all good. Like I say, this is just a matter of everybody. I'm not looking to give anybody any one up over the other. Like, we just want to have some good dialogue here. This is because to me, we're showing people like us. We're showing that we're the ones that people really need to be listened to, not those in the establishment media, or not the political pundits or propagandists that are constantly playing this stupid ideological game. Because that's why you're seeing the social media is taken over, and that's because people inherently, whether they have dogma or preconceived notions as far as an ideology that they respect or admire or adhere to, they'll recognize. People know when someone's at least trying to be honest, right? And that's the biggest thing that we've got that they don't, and I think it's a great thing for every one of us.
Yeah, you can tell when somebody's really offering a bullshit argument. Trump is a white nationalist racist. Yeah. That's the truth.
Anyways, so we're 1 minute or 2 minutes to. You almost done eating there, Victor?
Yeah, we're good to go. Let's go.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. All right. So all I'm going to do is a quick little intro, just to say, it's Matt Sands and Victor Prost. Now, as far as I'm just going to say this is a debate regarding the border issue, instead of bringing up whether closed or open, because like I say, I imagine you guys are going to offer nuanced, areas of your position, so that it's not going to be, black or white like you were suggesting. And actually, when I created that little thing, I wasn't trying to make it that way, but I just thought because I did the black and white kind of thing, it kind of would play. But yeah, I get it. It was
I get the design. That's brilliant. The yin yang thing there, or the light versus the dark, or the opposite.
Hey, you're the artist, man. I'm not an artist. I just try my best. But anyways, okay. So yeah, we're 1 minute too. So I'm probably going to get ready to go live here. Okay, let me click on. Okay, start broadcast. So you're both ready, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And everybody can hear everyone. Everyone can see everyone. Everything's working out good. Excellent.
Good visuals and sound.
Okay, we're getting ready to broadcast. Starting now. Okay, there we go. Hey, everyone. So we're getting ready to have this amazing debate with Matt Sands and Victor Prost in regards to the border issue that's on the minds of a lot of people these days. I'm sure you all recognize out there that you're hearing a lot of ideologically driven narratives by a lot of people as it pertains to the border issues or migration or immigration. What people like myself or Victor and Matt want to do is at least give you some clarity of thought, some clarity of mind, and some clarity of their positions, because not everything, even though I did set this up as a black or white issue, it was kind of to show that it's not actually that way. There is some nuance, there is some gray area, especially in regards to how the human mind thinks and how it pertains to an issue that's so expansive as immigration. Most of us, I think, understand that throughout most of history, modern history, immigration should have been something that would have been openly embraced, I think, by most people from either side of the political spectrum, just by sheer fact that, well, at least if you're a decent moral person, just by sheer fact that people should have the ability to seek out other places where they can strive and thrive and try to attempt to be successful or bring meaning to their life. So borders are one issue that reflects that. The problem is today we do live in an era where we do have a welfare state. We do have governments that get to forcefully impose or forcefully redistribute the incomes of their domestic citizens. Under that kind of paradigm, that's why you see a great divide today, even from people that have political leanings, whether they come from the left or the right, or even people that are apolitical or philosophical in nature. It's just a understanding of the fact that we have to deal with pragmatism and the reality and the reflection of the reality that we all have to endure. Like, we would all love to believe, I'm sure Victor, I'm sure Matt, I know myself, I would love to believe that we live in some conceptual world where everybody could just live freely and peaceful amongst each other. But we all understand that's a pipe dream. That's utopian. That's not reality. We can all dream of those things. We can write, we can, poetry, art. Those are beautiful things, and that's what we should all strive for. But we have to deal with these issues in a nuanced way so that it's not just black or white. It's a matter of some of that gray area, and that's what we're going to do today in this conversation. So I'm just going to let Matt and Victor, both of them, give themselves like 5 minutes each to take the time and put forth their initial position on the issue. I'm not sure which one you want to start, but Matt, Victor,
flip a coin.
Come before V. What's that? We'll let Matt go first. How's that, Matt?
Sure.
Yeah, that's fine. Just to quickly introduce sort of where I'm coming from. I'm an advocate for a would-be movement called Nations of Sanity, which is a very specific representation of voluntarism, and the basic premise is we should try to create a free society, or otherwise known as voluntarism, by establishing the non-aggression principle as the law through a peace agreement, basically making it the terms of peace between all people. That's how I think we should achieve a free society, and that is how I think we would define a free society. With regards to immigration, I'll just very briefly sort of lay down my position, and obviously I can elaborate as I discuss it with Victor going forward. But the long and the short of it is, for an anarchist or a voluntarist or a libertarian or anyone really with an understanding and appreciation for self-ownership, property rights and the non-aggression principle, the position with regards to state borders, the position regarding borders is that the only border you can violently enforce is that of rightfully owned private property. Obviously, the state borders are neither rightfully owned or private property. So although I do understand the nuance of Victor's position with regards to the implications with welfare state and voting and what have you, and we'll obviously delve into that as we go forward, but that's the basic position of an anarchist in my view, that's consistent with the non-aggression principle, is we can't advocate for state violence. And although I realise it isn't quite as simple as that with regards to the implications, the fact of the matter is we can't enforce state borders in line with the non-aggression principle because they are illegitimate, and as such, enforcing them would be illegitimate as well. So that's basically my position in a brief, and we can sort of go into more detail as we go forward.
Excellent. Thanks, Matt, for giving that initial premise as far as your stance on the issue. I think you did a great job there. Go ahead, Victor.
All right. Okay, very good. Yeah. Well, I think that there's probably a very great possibility for agreement here. I think that I just think it's just a matter of epistemology, understanding where we're both coming from, and we might, lo and behold, find to our great pleasure and delight that maybe we don't disagree after all. So I'm looking forward to that. I think that that's a very real potential that we have right here. So, let it to be, just to make my point clear, because if anybody who's been following me for the last 2 years know that I've been tarred and feathered with this statist label, because I just question the validity of the state, right? So, or of an open border, rather, because I question the legitimacy of an open border. Therefore, kind of put me on, whoa, that sounds like a dog whistle for nationalism. Status, Victor, So that's been like a gong show that's been going on. So let me make my point here clear. As the last 10 years of recorded history on YouTube and articles and debates and live presentations testifies that backs up where I stand today and where I've always stood. I am an advocate for a free market and private property. consistently. I am a full-blown Rothbarian, private property card-carrying, non-aggression, principle-loving anarchist. I am not a statist. So you have, with the border issue, in a free society, borders, if we're gonna use that term at all, it's determined and enforced by private property owners instead of a small cadre of people calling themselves government. That's the principle. As soon as you get government in there at all, then the question of open or closed border just still retains its status as a government fiat in either case. So I don't think the principled position is to take the case for open or closed borders, but to recognize where your philosophical foundation, anarchism, which does not involve the state. So therefore, a closed or open border in either case is a matter of government fiat, subject to change or expansion, and only for the benefit of the ruling elite, and always, as clearly as can be seen in today's world, always at the expense of the host population. So I can cut it off there, and we can go ahead and have any questions or fellow rebuttal or commentary, feel free.
Hey, well said, Victor. And you know what? Just as the very first point I want to bring in regards to both of your gentlemen's stance on this issue is, boy, the central planners that have been ruling things have really placed us all in a precarious situation. That's ultimately how I look at things these days. Is we have to take these stances and kind of battle against each other. But I'm glad that we're at least all willing to do so, because every intellectual conversation or debate such as this helps educate and elevate the mind of anyone else that's consuming this kind of content, and it helps give them a little clarity of thought, a little clarity of mind. And that's actually something I want to point out before we actually start getting really into this thing, is try to, when you're bringing up like the big terms and things, just try to at least try to stick to, because this is what I try to hold myself to in particular, because I realize the sophists of today, just like the sophists in the past, manipulate the language, regardless of the language you're using. Here we're using English, but they manipulate the language and completely reinvent the terms that we use. And you know, with anyone, if you speak a language, you know the only way you can speak back and forth with each other.
Left-wing academia.
Yeah, well, and the only way you can actually speak back and forth with each other is if you actually understand the true definitions of the terms and words you use.
Absolutely.
So keep that kind of clarity of the language, clarity of thought, and clarity of mind helps educate and inform people properly. That way they can delve into these things without coming at it from the wrong. You know, if you tell something that's incorrect as far as like facts as pertain to the language, then the person's not going to be able to actually have an objective or well-informed opinion. So let's at least, I will ask that of both of you gentlemen, stick to like even just the term liberal that you brought up, Victor. I don't even refer to these people as liberals. That's one thing that I did, and sometimes I find myself making that mistake as well, but they're not liberals, because just look up what a liberal means. They were
I know.
basically...
You know, I hear you. In regards to that's why we have to call it. That's why we have to call it classical liberalism, to make the distinction,
yes,
because of the epistemological jungle. And I do agree with Ayn Rand where she said that definitions are the guardians of rationality. So thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah. Anyway, so like I say, so since Matt started out and you offered, both of you gentlemen offered your initial statements, then Matt, you go ahead and take the floor, man.
Yeah, well, as you say, it is important to clarify terms and the meanings behind the words we're using. Obviously, we're both going into this with good faith, so we should be able to understand each other well enough and clarify where it needs to be clarified. As I say, I personally identify as a voluntarist, kind of the same as an anarchist, similar to a libertarian. I mean, the word libertarian's been... A lot of people who identify as libertarian, I struggle to distinguish from conservatives a little bit. So again, that's another example of where a label kind of gets stretched beyond its original kind of meaning. But I like the term voluntarist because I think it hits closer to what it's all about, even more so than anarchist, because anarchist is basically, we don't want a state ruling us. Voluntarist is more about, we want an actual free society, and it more specifies, the non-aggression principle, self-ownership and property rights being, basically what it's all about. So and also it helps distinguish proper anarchism from, anarcho-communism and nonsense like that. So, I prefer the term voluntarist for that reason. And as I say, just to sort of reiterate my point with regards to the borders thing. And as I say, I do understand that there's. Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't even want to interrupt you, but I just wanted to actually get you to help clarify this, not just for me, but for anyone that's going to watch this. Because actually, when you were talking about that, I have actually never delved into it. I fully understand the term voluntarism, but I'm just curious myself. Whereas at least libertarians, because of its philosophical endeavor, it does at least have a baseline grounding as far as the principles, so non-aggression principle, self-ownership, private property. Does voluntarism at least have a structure of kind of rules? Because like I said, anarchists, libertarians, voluntarists, I recognize that we're probably always against some superimposed state. But one thing I understand about libertarians is that they at least have the premise of how we should deal with each other in society, and it's universally consistent. So does voluntarism, and I'm not trying to put you on the spot here, I'm just really looking for clarity here. Does voluntarism, because I've never actually delved into it too much, does that entail actual, the same kind of concept as far as, the non-aggression principle and such?
Yeah, I mean, I basically would sort of define it as what libertarianism should be, or I suppose you could describe libertarianism, anarchism, and voluntarism could all be different words for the same thing in that sense, because many anarchists just identify with the non-aggression principle as their basis for their objection to governments and rulers. As you say, libertarianism is very embedded with the non-aggression principle. I mean, voluntarism is really like libertarianism, but perhaps a purist version where it's literally focusing on that. I mean, like I say, the only problem I have with libertarianism, a lot of so-called libertarians, as I say, are often minarchists. They're not full-out voluntarists. They'll accept a bit of government here and there and stuff like that. So that's why I don't use the term libertarian myself, because, as I say, many are almost indistinguishable from conservatives. So, anarchist is closer to it, but I think voluntarist is the most accurate term. I mean, basically, I think the non-aggression principle defines crime objectively and universally. It defines aggression objectively and universally. As a result of that, that's why, with the Nations of Sanity, the whole idea of making it the law through a peace agreement, because obviously you can't have an authority bringing down the law, but you can still establish law as the terms of peace, because that's what law is. It's basically the terms of peace. It's basically saying this is when you're breaking the peace and we'll use force against you. It's very similar, almost the same to libertarianism in that sense, that the non-aggression principle defines what is a crime and what is not a crime, doesn't deal with higher ideals. We all have different preferences and higher moralities, subjective moralities, but the basic objective standard of aggressing against somebody, which the non-aggression principle covers, and like you say, you couple that with the concept of self-ownership, and property rights is just an extension of self-ownership. It comes from that. So it's all built around, but I kind of view the non-aggression principle as the overriding principle. And then you've got self-ownership and you've got property rights, basically as an extension of that.
Yeah, Matt, and maybe we could bridge any possible gaps, since you do bring up voluntarism and non-aggression. Would you agree with me that, as understood by anarchists in the anarchist communities or anarchist philosophy, if you want to put it that way, that aggression has to be carefully defined? You can't have this some kind of socialist or zeitgeist idea of exploitation, that somebody's being violently coerced just because the sales lady at the candy bar upsold the customer from a small Coke to a large one, also including in there a popcorn, as aggression, right? In this zeitgeist fantasy bullshit robot world, right? So non-aggression, that the only way that you could possibly ever rationally violate somebody's rights or assert aggression against them takes the form of force against, always, right across the board, against their will, and the only way that you can do that is through murder, kidnapping, theft, fraud, which is an indirect use of force, and rape. Physical coercion, it has to be physical, and it has to be against the person's will. That's the non-aggression principle, very easily defined in a very condensed form. Yeah,
definitely. It's an important clarification to make, because it's probably this ties to the limitations with our language, aggression. I mean, I often say you can do what you want as long as you don't cause harm to others. But then people are like, well, what sort of harm? Emotional harm? And I'm like, no. So, and even with aggression, like you say, some people can define aggression in all kinds of absurd ways. So it is important to clarify what we're talking about when we're talking about aggression, when we're talking about causing people harm. As I say, people do take these things to ridiculous extremes.
Oh my God.
One of the rationales I've heard for the whole property is theft nonsense was the idea that you're stopping me from walking in a straight line if your house is in the straight line I want to walk. I mean, it's madness, and it's kind of Walter Block's spoken before about the continuum problem. Like, even when you've got a black and white standard of this is right and this is wrong, there's still sometimes a continuum problem of precisely where you draw the line. One of the reasons why the peace agreement that the Nations of Sanity presents is a 3-part agreement is to deal with that continuum problem, because simply getting everyone to agree to establish the non-aggression principle as law on its own wouldn't quite do the trick. And for that reason, part 1 is just that part of the agreement. And then part 2 is drawing those lines, what I call the lines in the sand, to draw limits of tolerance over differing interpretations. Because there are grey areas, there are fuzzy edges, and that's fine. We can accept that, but we need to draw lines so people don't stretch interpretations to absurdities. So that, like for example, there's a big difference between me building property around your property and essentially imprisoning you, meaning you cannot move, and me building a house like I say, within a straight line that you want to walk, and you've got to deviate a few meters on your journey. So there's one thing is certainly not stopping you. Again, it's like, just to give an example of how absurd it is if I was standing in the middle of a field, then you're going to walk in a straight line, and I happen to be standing in that straight line you're going to walk. You might have to step to the left or to the right a meter or so to avoid me. I'm not stopping you from going on your way. But if you're walking down, say, a narrow pathway, and I put my arms out and literally blocked you, then that obviously is. And these are rational distinctions that any rational person should make. But I think the fact that you have the nonsensical claims about property being theft based on ridiculous notions of, well, you're stopping me walking in a straight line, or what have you, because there are always going to be idiots that will push interpretations into absurdity. That's why I think you need to draw those lines, just to sort of say, okay, well, we might be able to have a rational debate over exactly where we draw the line here and here, but over there, it's pretty black and white.
Okay, good. No, so what we've established then so far, this is not this is why I had issue with the title of the video that you're going to go there, open border closes versus closed border, or open versus closed, that whole thing, right? So since we've established that we are coming at this not as like I'm a conservative and you're an anarchist or a voluntarist, we're talking about two, you and me, Matt. as volunteers, as anarchists, and that's where we're coming at this. So we both agree to the proper rational definition of what constitutes aggression versus a socialist or zeitgeist type of interpretation that goes off into left-wing fantasy land, a kabuki theater of absurd concepts and ideas that float up into Plato's helium balloon. But so now we're both on the same ground level. That's what I get from this, and that's beautiful. That's a beautiful thing. I wish I could have established that with Lark and Rose, but too bad. So further, I wanted to ask him if you do advocate property rights and how you understand that. Go ahead, Ben. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh no! I just wanted to point out for a little bit of clarity, based on both of your gentlemen's statements so far, you're both actually completely aligned with what I would completely expect. Like I say, not even knowing Matt from a hole in the ground, but you're both coming from a position that makes 100% sense. And why that is because you're suggesting that you should deal with each other as individuals, and every incident, every situation as an isolated situation or incident. That's the beautiful thing. Like Matt suggested and what alluded to, and what Victor I'm sure aligns with completely, is yes, let's deal. That's the beautiful thing about the individual thought and deal with people as individuals rather than collectives. Is yes, there's lots of situations or scenarios that you could paint, or there might be this thing where there is that gray area. Where do you fall on it, right? But it is the sheer fact that we can deal with each other as individuals and each case or incident as individual cases or incidents that allows us to not be so rigid, right? That's the beautiful thing.
Well, I want to
anyways,
find out if we are on opposite
ahead.
sides of this issue. That's what I want to find out. That's so I don't want to cause gaps. I want to bridge, and that's what brings me to my question. Is that we agree on so much right now. Do we agree that are we advocates, and do you agree with the idea of property rights? And how would you define that, if so? See, we agree there.
Mean, as I say, it's an extension of self-ownership. I mean, basically, you own yourself, you own the product of your labour. Therefore, you can obtain property which you own. I mean, the sort of standard ways to attain property rightful ownership would be to either create something or to voluntarily trade for it. So, like, you know, giving a simple example, you either build the house or you buy it off the people that build the house. Either way, the house is yours, assuming it's a voluntary trade, no coercions involved and what have you, and assuming you're not violating the non-aggression principle in any other way. Like I say, I can't build a donut-shaped house around your house and trap you and make it so that you can't leave without trespassing and stuff like that, or I can't build some kind of building that blocks out. You know, I mean, there's, like I say, there's reasonable things as long as I'm not infringing on you. But the basic, the basic premise is that property rights is an extension of self-ownership.
Okay, yeah, and that's pretty Rothbarian, I guess. You know, right wing, John Lockean kind of.
I consider myself right wing, but
yeah. Well, okay, yeah. I'll modify that and take it out. You know, but a Lockean understanding of property rights. Okay, so where just to get back onto the track of what the discussion's all about, like how do you account for, how do you respond to my initial statement of where I stand on the question of what I regard as the false dichotomy of open versus closed borders, and what would be your case for open borders if indeed you are making a case for open borders, but also accounting for my preamble statements regarding open borders, though?
Yeah, I mean, I understand what you're saying with regards to it being a false dichotomy, and I basically agree with that. And I think the area where we're united is on how it should be in a free society, whereas the only valid borders are that of rightfully owned private property. I think where we disagree, or perhaps where, just to sort of, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, obviously, but I think if I'm understanding your position correctly, it's not that we disagree on how it should be in a free society, but what you're saying is we're not in a free society right now. Yeah. We're in a state society, and within that paradigm, and because of things like welfare and voting and what have you, and taxation and that, because of that, it's not quite as simple as there's no such thing as state borders. And although I'm assuming you recognise the principle, I mean, just to clarify my position, I'm not an advocate for open state borders with that whole equation of, you know, welfare and what have you. I'm simply saying that obviously in a free society, these state borders wouldn't exist. They'd be a non-issue. We're in a society that's not free, and there's a government that claims these state borders. But I'm saying, as a voluntarist, even within the statist paradigm, we still don't recognise it. Like, just because we're in the statist paradigm, I'm still going to reject all forms of state violence. So I'm still against drug laws, even though they'd be a non-issue in a free society as well. I'm still against any time the state basically initiates force against peaceful people and violates the non-aggression principle. And unfortunately, border enforcement does do that. And while I do understand all the problems associated with immigration, my point is that the crime isn't somebody walking over this arbitrary line. The crime is the government stealing from us, like I say, the whole statist situation. So although I do agree that there's a problem with that equation that includes immigration, the actual criminal element falls at the feet of the state. The state is the criminals involved, and the crime is their is the taxation, is their ruling, and so that's. I hope that clarifies my position. That's basically where I'm coming from. I can't condone the state violence used to enforce national borders. In fact, I can't. And it's not just the state doing it. If private people done it as well, because these borders are illegitimate. As I say, the only borders that we can enforce are the borders of rightfully owned private property. And even though I understand that you would be on the same page as me in a free society, I think we differ because I'm still holding that position in the statist paradigm that we're actually in. And I say, you correct me if I'm wrong, and
Well,
obviously
yeah,
elaborate
no.
your
If
position
we
a bit
were
more,
in
but-
an anarchist society, and you declared yourself by a philosophical tag of being a voluntarist, there's no conflict whatsoever. But you're saying that there is a possible conflict or a difference of opinion that we have that's made possible because there is, in fact, a state that we can find ourselves somehow on opposite sides. And as you said, you cannot morally justify imposed borders. Okay. So would that be a summary of your position then? That's an example of further statism. That's even worse now because you got freaking borders. Is that what you're saying ultimately then?
Yeah, I mean, I'm basically saying that we shouldn't be accepting anything that is a violation of the non-aggression principle. And although I understand that you'd be on the same page as me in a free society, I think we should be adopting the same stance within the statist paradigm. Like, though I appreciate the implications with regards to immigration and the border, and I don't advocate for like I say, the crimes involved with regards to the taxation and the welfare and all the rest of it. But
No,
what
I
I'm
hope
saying
not.
is those are the but what I'm saying is those are the crimes.
Yeah.
As a voluntarist, as an anarchist, that's the crime. That's the violation of the non-aggression principle. Immigrants aren't violating the non-aggression principle, and they're not aggressing against us when they walk over state borders because they're not. It's not a legitimate border, as I say. So that's kind of the where I'm coming from.
Okay, well let me put this to you. Okay, I just want to establish the exactness of your position because it's not enough just to say, are you for open borders? Why, yes I am, and then there's no definition of what borders are and what constitutes the legitimacy of it or not. So it has to be fleshed out. So thank you for taking the time on that. Yeah, it's like. And it is for, absolutely for sure, like closed borders, state borders and passports and all of this is unnatural, coercive. It's all based on coercive institution. All of this, of course it is. There's nothing here that can be called the organic, spontaneous movement of people because it's being infringed upon. So the spontaneity is being juiced out of it, right? So that can't be described as the spontaneous movement of people when you have passports and want to see your papers, as Larkin Rose would put it, right? But by the same token, I would argue, when the welfare state lures welfare migrants, it's like a magnet, and the moral culpability is an issue that can be argued, right? But the fact is, you have the welfare state, and migrants are drawn to a given centrally controlled state, which is made possible by the further exploitation of the host population, is made possible by an open border. So where you have, let's say, for example, the caravan that was happening, I don't know what's going on right now with it. I don't know what the status is, but this whole caravan phenomenon that was all the rage of the media, popular media and alternative media. That's not an organic, spontaneous movement of people, for Christ's sakes. That's lefty anarchists are representing it as it was like a natural phenomena and the state's going to violate their rights. It's a construct and manipulation of the state, for Christ's sakes. That's not a spontaneous movement of people. The whole issue of open versus closed is a false dichotomy. The principled position is only to be found in a totally free society. That's where the principle resides, and that is why the open border advocates, by which I mean Larkin Rose and his minions, are wrong, objectively speaking.
Can I just say something real quick there, gentlemen? Because I think this is somewhere you guys might want to delve into. I think a lot of this, because just based on listening to both of your gentlemen's points, and like I say, I respect both of you for putting them out. I think it's great. Both of you seem like you're completely coming from a place of just being decent human beings that just wanted to figure what's the best way to go forward with this stuff. But what
part of my fiery rhetoric there, I do get a little charged up, but I'm
no, Victor, don't worry. Like I say, everything, complete. It's just as you gentlemen are talking. Like I say, Its brain never stops unless I'm sleeping. That's only if I smoke enough dope. But anyway,
Oh,
but
you're talking my language now.
what I'm just thinking of as a father of two, doesn't it all come down to, because when you're talking about countries, right? And I mean, we'd all love to live, like I say, this utopian where there's no such thing as country borders and stuff. But if you think about it, it's kind of like, and they even put forth the notion of the social contract, right? So it's kind of supposed to be like a familial type of structure. And I just think of it as a father of two. If I was raising my two sons, teaching them to be self-reliant, self-efficient, teaching them the good moral principles and values that I hold dear myself. And then if someone come along, like a new entrant, let's say we adopted and didn't have to teach them anything, and they just got that allowance, the same as my two sons that had to figure out that proper social and economic structure and why they should be rewarded and compensated for, doing positive things. The state kind of represents that it's that distortion to me. It's that distortion where the incentives have been so completely destroyed, which is why I see good people like yourself, both of you. I see two really good people. They're arguing from a little bit, I think, seemingly from different perspectives or points, but I think ultimately, you're both in unison as far as understanding that really what it comes down to ultimately, it's the state, it's the central planners are the ones that are causing all this divide, this divisiveness. I think most people are just live, let live. And I think even biology, history, evolution suggested that was the best strategy going forward, is to not just to be pure domineering. They've shown that even in the animal kingdom, that even under some of the ape species, if you just try to dominate by brute force alone, well, all it'll take a couple betas later to wait till you're sleeping, and then that's. So I think as a structure, even in the animal kingdom, but much more so in the human societies, is it's just a matter of being fair. And what we all recognize out there today with a top-down authoritarian structure is fairness. Well, sometimes it'll work out good for like the domestic population, but if the politician decides that the domestic population isn't construent or aligned with what they want to do, well, they'll look to external entities or structures or populations to put forth. And to me, it's just a matter of freedom. Let freedom. To me, it comes down to let freedom happen, and then you'll see that people.
But that's what we're discussing. We're discussing whether a national border, or if it's where the government imposes all its other encroachments, like the welfare state and whatnot. Like, that's bad enough. But like, at least if the border was open, does that constitute freedom? That is exactly what we're discussing, and I want to hear further from Matt in regards to that. I'm also interested in this whole idea of of what you mentioned about universal law or something to that effect. I do want to ask you about that. If you can conceive of and would advocate a global anarchism, or would you just reside yourself to the issue of a geographical form of anarchism, a given society that actually achieved that state, or would you go for a global anarchism? Because that'd be interesting in regards to the border issue for sure.
Well,
no borders. Yeah.
The law thing. I mean, it's the aim would be global because it's universal law. So what's a crime over here is a crime over there, and it's a crime everywhere. That's the beauty of the non-aggression principle. Is it's a universalizable principle. It's something that can be applied to everybody equally. I mean, if I'm ever trying to sell this to people of left-wing persuasion, I often invoke terms like equality, and I talk about equal rights. And I say, well, if you want to live in a world where everyone has equal rights, literally, as a matter of mathematical certainty, the only way you get that is if the non-aggression principle is the law, because negative rights are the only rights that can be applied universally. As soon as you violate the non-aggression principle, as soon as you upset that balance, equality of rights, at least, becomes impossible. So yeah, that would be the goal. It's an ambitious one, but that's basically what the Nations of Sanity is proposing. It's basically saying, if we want to create a free society, this is what a free society would look like, and this is how we would create one, is we would establish the non-aggression principle as the universal laws, the universal terms of peace.
Yes.
As I say, it's not quite as simple as that in regards to, that's why it's a three-part agreement, because we need to set the boundaries with the part two and perhaps clarify rightful ownership with part three. That's why it's a three-part agreement rather than a one-part agreement. But that's basically what that three parts is about doing. It's just about establishing the non-aggression principles law. Part one is to get everyone to agree to that principle, and sort of part one would achieve everyone understanding what the non-aggression principle is. And once you've got that, part two and three are almost self-evident, but I still think they need to be declared ahead of the time, just so everyone knows where they stand. We need to know where the lines in the sand are drawn, because obviously those are the lines that declare when force can or cannot be used. So,
Right. Okay.
it's just applying that objective standard. And then when you've got that, that's when you have a freedom that's completely universalizable as well, because everyone can be equally free under that. I once had someone question whether even those laws would be an infringement of freedom. And I used the example of the law against rape being one example, and saying, well, how can a law against rape be a violation of your freedom unless you think your freedom includes the right to rape people? If you think your freedom includes the right to do what you want as long as you don't violate other people's same exact right to the same exact freedom, then it's not a violation of your freedom. If you want to take the definition of freedom to extreme terms to the point, then you might dispute that. But again, this is where clarifying terms and definitions with the words is obviously important.
Yeah, no, exactly.
But yeah, sorry.
Okay, no, a clarification of structure of hierarchy and knowledge and definitions and things like that. And let me give you a perfect example of what I'm talking about. Okay, you're speaking of individual, of volunteerism, of non-aggression, of the recognition of rights, if you want to put it and phrase it that way, and property rights. The problem is that if you take those concepts and not apply them consistently, and I can give you an example of where you can off-rail that, is that if you have a case of elevating open borders as some kind of like anarchist doctrine, then you're not taking a full account of the entire context. Okay, you could say, what right does a person have from the caravan from stopping those people, when the structure in that society where you have this divisions with the President of the United States, it's a real conflict between Trump and the Democrats. That's not like some puppets doing a show in this case. I don't think that whatsoever. There is a conflict where the Demorats, as I call them, are looking to fatten their voting base, which in turn fattens the welfare state, which in turn expands expands the state in that capacity. If you just remove all of that and just elevate open borders as if that was an example of the recognition of property rights, to me it can be argued that it is an exact case of the infringement of property rights, because bad enough that we live in a society where Peter has to pay Paul, but now we have Peter and Paul having to pay Muhammad. So I can't see how people don't understand this to be an expansion of state powers. It's absolutely astounding to me that people can't see this.
Well, I can understand the argument that the state's bringing in people, like, for example, if a particular side, like you said, Democrats in America will want to bring in people that are likely to vote for them.
But you see the problem with open borders, if you take that as some kind of like platonic absolute, can be at odds with property rights.
Well, but the thing is, I can't speak for Larkin Rose, but every sort of time I've heard him speak on the subject, it's pretty similar to what I'm saying now. So I don't necessarily think he's advocating for open state borders, just as I'm not advocating for open state borders. It's more a case of saying we don't recognise state borders as legitimate, therefore oppose the enforcement of those state borders. Therefore, other people could say, well, that's basically open borders. It's like, well, you could say that it's like open borders, but it's more a case of we don't recognise the borders at all. So it's not,
and it's universalized,
or at least in my mind, anyway.
Right? It's universalizable. So would you say, as not a matter of prepared measure, or not because of greater armaments or privatizing all of the area of Israel right now with the government right there? On principle, should they open their borders yesterday?
Who's this? Israel, you say?
Yeah, Israel.
Well, again, I don't. I suppose. Well, it's not about opening their borders. What I'm advocating for is a free society. So the government should be gone. The state violence should be gone. So that would include, obviously, the enforcement of illegitimate borders, state borders, but it also includes all the other things that make immigration a problem. that make migration a problem. I realise that doesn't deal with the issue of defence necessarily directly, but that's something that needs to be dealt with within itself, because you can be attacked from within your country just as much as you can be attacked.
The open border position is that while there is a state there, we're not talking about a free society, because there is, in that society, there is no disagreement between you and me, and this show wouldn't even be aired because it wouldn't exist. We wouldn't be having this conversation. We're having this conversation with a state. Now, if you're saying that state borders is an imposition and a violation of rights, I would agree with that. But your position, therefore, is that while there's a state, open borders, perhaps by de facto or default or whatnot, would be the established case. Is that not a fair representation or understanding of the open border position? Or there is, or maybe we don't have a disagreement then. That would be wonderful if that was the thing.
Yeah, I mean, I would describe it more to say that the existence of the state doesn't change the fact that I don't recognise their borders, and I don't, like I say, we're on the same page in a free society. You say, but what about in this? We're not in a free society.
You do understand my actual position, though. You understand the argument, though, right? Because a lot of people are having trouble with this. A lot of people are having trouble with this. I don't understand why.
I understand what you're. No, I do.
I'm calling for a free society. The borders, it becomes a moot subject.
Yeah, no, I fully understand what you're saying.
Therefore, I'm not arguing for open, closed borders. I'm arguing for an open border. What?
Yeah, no.
What?
I understand that you're basically saying that you like I say you wouldn't have nothing to do with a state border in a free society. It wouldn't exist, and it would be a non-issue. I understand what you're saying, and I understand that. You're quite happy to advocate for the same free society that I'm advocating for, as far as I can tell. I know I haven't gone into every little detail, but basically on the surface, we're both advocating for the same thing. But what you're saying is that within the current paradigm, though, that we live, the state paradigm is a different situation. I'm saying, although it is a different situation with regard, I'm not blind to the implications, but what I'm saying is the voluntarist position, the non-aggression principle consistent position with regards to state borders doesn't change. Just because you've got a welfare state, just because you've got all these reasons why immigration becomes a big problem and why governments may be motivated to do it in an engineered fashion, I don't doubt that for a second. But all of that is just more arguments for why we need to get rid of the government, because they're screwing us royally in every direction, in every angle, in every way. Immigration is just one of many examples of that. But what I'm saying is all of those scenarios doesn't change the fact that it will violate the non-aggression principle to use force to enforce state borders. You can say that, okay, that's basically advocating for open borders. I mean, I'm not attacking it from that position, but yeah, I suppose that is how it defaults. But it's more a case of, because to be clear, just as obviously you don't want to be strawmanned into advocating for close state borders, I'm certainly not advocating, and as far as I can tell, I don't think
you don't want to be. It wouldn't be the case. Because if somebody can say that I'm advocating state borders, it's ridiculous. They're not taking account of my open declaration, my opposing and defying, and denouncing and indicating that that's not right. I have a whole 10-year cyber history to back it up. So where are they getting this from?
And I do understand
borders, right? What?
Yeah, no, but I am accounting for that, and I do understand that you're not advocating for close state. I understand your position. I'm not looking to strawman you. I understand that that you're advocating for a free society. That would be your preference, but your position with regards to this state border.
My only fear down in a free society is these anarchists who make these charges. Of what kind of justice system we would have if they had any leverage at all. That's what I'm worried about. Now,
how do you mean? Sorry.
Well, yeah. The bulldog and tarred and feathered approach. Because I questioned the validity of open borders even before I could even utter a philosophical position in elaboration. I was attacked. What kind of justice is that from the anarchist community?
Well, yeah.
You wonder why minarchists have cause for concern? How about we listen to the arguments, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, like I say, I understand your position, but I think the thing is because one of the things I have seen you say a lot of the times is you've rejected the idea that your position on the state border issue is pragmatism. I've heard you make the argument.
I'm arguing from principle. I argue for principle.
Okay, could you elaborate on that? Because, and again, perhaps clarify your position with regards to the state borders.
Well, this is another thing. Like this whole, once again, we're getting way off the epistemological rational tracks here. Okay, this is why philosophy is the foundation. Okay, the foundation we have to get back to. Okay, these anarchists who mock and scoff the Western canon, Western civilization, the bedrock of science, rationality, recognition of rights, even with the minarchist argument for a limited government, they made the mistake of thinking that government is some kind of gravitational pull. It's just a metaphysical given. But how can we tame this monster? How we can tame it? Versus other regions of the world where the state becomes enshrined. You know, you had that, unfortunately, in Europe, softened by the Enlightenment movement, but where you have countries like the Middle East, for Christ's sakes. Don't you understand the epistemological and metaphysical foundation of that state is subjugation to the supernatural? It's statism in action. This has nothing to do with skin color. This has nothing to do with charges of Islamophobia or whatnot. No, but that's another thing that's all problematic is right there. It's like Islam is statism, for Christ's sakes. So the whole idea of the state, and this question of open and closed borders, don't you understand, Matt, that it's transient? Somebody gave me an argument on Facebook the other day and said, what are you talking about? Europe doesn't have this open border thing there. You still have to go get passports, and I still had to have this stamped and that stamped to go from Canada or the US to go to France or whatever. So what open border? It's transient and flexible and malleable according to government fiat. There is no principle of an open or a closed borders. They'll make it difficult for white people to get in there or whatnot, or to settle there. And they're opening the floodgates to economic third world migrants. And a great deal of them are very seriously damaged people. And in the name of open borders, I mean, Stefan Molyneux talks about empiricism. You know, he's a philosopher who's tried to get us back down to the basics, which is always philosophy, before you even start to philosophize midstream into politics and whether we should have open or closed borders or not. Political issues. Get back to the philosophy. Try to indicate that culture matters.
Well, I mean, I don't want to divert the.
Well, where are you going to get a free society with an influx of these third world collectivists where the Democrats are purposefully, demonstratively trying to fatten the voter base? And they're doing it via the government artifact known as immigration. In this case, in the fluency, the Heraclitus flux of open versus closed. They're doing it, gentlemen, through open borders.
Just real quick there, Victor. I just want to offer in there because I see where both of you are coming from. I think that position where I think you got to bring into the principle versus pragmatism aspect of it, because you guys have both brought that up. And this is somewhere I think that's going to delve into and right into the core, in the heart of this kind of discussion.
Purity versus pragmatism. Oh my God.
I once again, I love to allude to scenarios, right? Because then people can visualize and conceptualize that in their head. Is those of us that are principled, and it sounds like both of you gentlemen are very principled. And those are the people that, like I say, initially, if I'm going to deal with people, I want to deal with people that work and function from a basis of some kind of a principle. So I'm very...
Principle, yeah. Don't make open borders a Platonic ivory tower principle.
Well, the problem though is
all throughout any context,
right? But just like some of the concepts, even some of the collectivist utopias concepts, they no doubt that a lot of them have a lot of good ideas or concepts in their mind, and they just want to strive for that. But once again, the principles are great, like I say, but it's the pragmatism and
Freedom
the
of movement doesn't trump property rights.
I consider a scenario, like if you're someone that's completely against use preemptive force or violence, but it's high time at noon, some guy's getting ready to shoot you. Well, you don't want to wait till the guy's done. My problem is with all of these concepts that we all derive, and like I say, I'm trying to negate or deny either your guys' position, because I respect both of you. I think both of you made excellent points, but it comes down to, at the end of the day, like you're both kind of somewhat alluding to right now, is we got to be a little bit pragmatic here, because we can hold ourselves to real higher standards, and we can, and I want to do it myself, just like I know both of you gentlemen